Hi, this is Jose Luis here at Parametric Camp, and welcome to a new video where we're going to write our first Grasshopper plugin. Yay! Are you not excited? I'm going to call this video Hello Grasshopper Plugin. Okay? I kind of like that. As a homage to the Hello World program that we typically learn when we get introduced to a new programming language. So, what are we going to do? The way we're going to do that is that in this video, I'm going to teach you how to install Visual Studio. Well, I'm actually not going to do that, but I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to teach you how to install the templates that we use to start Grasshopper plugins in a fast way. And then I'm going to teach you how to compile that Grasshopper plugin and load it in Rhino and create a development workflow so that we can change code and file Rhino a bit faster, etc., and get ourselves ready with a template to then be able to start writing our new components from scratch in the next videos. All right. So first of all, what do you need in order to do this? First of all, you're going to need Visual Studio. All right. Visual Studio, as you probably already know, is the most popular development environment for C# based code for Windows applications. It's the programming environment that we're going to be using for Grasshopper development, and it's different. Visual Studio is different from Visual Studio Code, which is a very similar environment, but that one is actually much more oriented to other programming languages. So my recommendation for you is that you use Visual Studio. I'm going to be using an old 2019 version, but you can download the most recent community version, okay? And I'm actually going to assume for these videos that you are slightly familiar with the Visual Studio environment. If you only used it one or twice, it's fine, you can probably follow up. But if you don't, I would like to recommend that you perhaps take a closer look at the videos that I have in my other playlist, Learning C#, all right? And then specifically you take a look at how to install Visual Studio and take a general look at the Visual Studio interface and how to, and maybe you want to do the Hello World program also to get comfortable with Visual Studio, all right? So cards with links to this playlist will be popping up somewhere here on the video, and there will be a link in the description of this video. So once you have Visual Studio on your system, I'm going to double click, and I would like to ask you to turn it to fire it, all right? And as opposed to typically starting a project, what I would like to do is I'm going to start Visual Studio without any code. I'm not going to load any program. I'm going to start a blank, empty Visual Studio, which arguably is quite useless. But we're doing this because what we want is first install the tools in Visual Studio that will help us kickstart Grasshopper plugin projects. We're going to do that by going to Extensions, Manage Extensions, and Extensions is very similar to actually the package manager that I've shown before in my previous video for the Rhino, right? It's this thing that you can go and then you can download these packages that enhance and give you extra features to how Visual Studio works. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Manage Extensions online, and I'm going to search here for Rhino. Let's see what shows up. And we can see that already we have a few options here. Rhino Common Templates, Rhino Common Grasshopper Templates for version 6. This is from previous versions where downloading stuff for Rhino and for Grasshopper were two different templates. Now for version 7, they have unified everything in one template. So I'm going to go to the Rhino Common and Grasshopper templates for Rhino 7, and I'm going to download this package, okay? I'm going to close, restart Visual Studio, and then as I do, the package with all these templates will get started. So I click modify and everything starts, etc., etc. And this will effectively load all these templates and all these tools in my Visual Studio installation that will help me kickstart Rhino Common, Grasshopper, and many other Rhino related projects like Rhino plugins, Rhino commands, a lot of interesting stuff. So now, if I do that, as I run Visual Studio, when I say create a new project, because of that template, now all of a sudden I have this new set of possibilities that I did not have before I installed the extension. What this is going to be is that Rhino and Grasshopper, what they give us is basically template projects with all the infrastructure and all the setup and a couple basic examples of how to write a Grasshopper plugin that are very useful for us to accelerate and get us kickstarted really fast. Because then the only thing we need to do is just go in, change some of the names, change some of the code, and start writing our own plugin. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new Grasshopper assembly for Rhino 7 in C#. You can actually write Grasshopper plugins in Visual Basic, but it's 2022. I'm not sure why would anyone do that. I'm sure David Rutten has a lot of opinions about that, which I would actually like, very interested in hearing. But Visual Basic is a programming language that it's kind of falling in not use, in disuse, or however the word is that. So, and since we've already learned so much C#, why not stick to that? So Grasshopper Assembly for Rhino 7 in C#, and I'm going to click Next. I'm going to drop this on my desktop, and then I'm going to call this project Hello Grasshopper Plugin. Oops. Hello Grasshopper Plugin. Or should I do more... let me just call this my first Grasshopper plugin. All right. Actually, you know what? Why don't we just do it? Let's call this Pcam Grasshopper plugin. Okay, because we're going to just work with this project for the time being. All right. I'm going to click my desktop and I'm going to leave this on, place solution and project in the same directory. That's absolutely fine. All right. So I'm going to create this, and all of a sudden I get this menu that asks me for some default information. What does that mean? It means that the template generator is giving me the possibility to already populate my project with some boilerplate, with some predetermined code. What that means is that, first of all, I can choose the name of my plugin. I'm going to stick to Pcam Grasshopper plugin. There's going to be one component class, so one base class that I'm going to be using. I can call this as well. And then my first component can have these names, which we're going to override very soon. Also, I'm going to click here on Provide Sample Code because I would like the template to generate two components so that I can see already that something is working and that I get something on Grasshopper and on Rhino, right? And last but not least, the template is probably going to do a good job at figuring out where your local Rhino installation is, which in my case, it's this one, all right? But if it's not, make sure that you browse here and then you find where in your system your Rhino 7 lives, because this will be very helpful when we start developing in Visual Studio and we say, can I try running this Grasshopper plugin? And then Visual Studio will start Rhino on your behalf with the component already loaded and with a system that will allow us to debug the code. So I'm going to finish that, and now the template generator is creating the project on my behalf, and it's actually, let me move this here, Pcam, Grasshopper plugin, etc. And you can see that I already have stuff here. So you can see that, for example, I have a project that has two main C# files. It has the Pcam Grasshopper plugin info, and then it has this Pcam Grasshopper plugin component. All right. Now, we will get more into the details of what this is, but for the time being, just let's keep in mind that the plugin info component is basically code that tells the plugin what version of the plugin it is, whether if it should have an icon, who is the author, etc. It's basically metadata that is useful for other plugins to know each other, for Grasshopper to know how to handle plugins together, and if you're posting this on a package manager to have additional data about what this plugin is about. And then there is this also file that is called the Pcam Grasshopper plugin component, which is already this boilerplate, this sample code of some code running something. In this case, you can see that we can read that it's going to create this spiral given the radius and the number, whatever. And you can see that we already have some code here in this register input parameters, output parameters, solve instance. I don't really know what any of that is. There's another file here. I have no idea what any of this means, but we will see what all this means in further videos. But what I want now is, since we actually have a plugin with one component, I would actually like to see if this runs and how can I run this code inside of Grasshopper. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to keep debug as an option, and I'm going to hit Pcam Grasshopper plugin. I'm going to run this Visual Studio project, and you can see that immediately Rhino is, you can see that Visual Studio opened my Rhino installation. That's because the path and that's because the path in the template generator was correct. If this is not working for you, it's because Visual Studio cannot find where Rhino lives on your system. And then as I open Grasshopper, what I would expect to happen is for this new component that I have created to show up as a plugin. All right. That is not what's going to happen because, first of all, for reasons that we will see very soon, this component was not designed to be a standalone plugin, but this component was designed to actually live inside of the curve category and inside of the primitive tab, or vice versa. So instead of an actual standalone plugin, where that component lives is in curves and is in primitives. Okay? So this is what I should find this component. However, I can't find it right now. You see, it's not anywhere to be found, as far as I can tell, I believe. It's nowhere to be found because the way the project is set up is to be able to compile the Grasshopper plugin, but the project right now is not placing that Grasshopper file in anywhere that the Rhino environment can read. Okay, so let's see how we can fix that. So first of all, I'm going to close Rhino. I'm going to go to my project. I'm going to go to binaries to debug net48, and you can see that inside of my project in binary debug net48, you can see that I have this GHA file that we have seen in previous plugins, and this PDB that is a debug file that it's we don't really need that for right now. But this Grasshopper file is the plugin that I want, and it's a file that contains the code for my plugin. However, because this file is in this folder, Pcam plugin on my desktop, blah, 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 Rhino is not able to see it. It's not able to figure out that there is a library here that it should load in its environment. So what we need to do is we need to take this file and load it into our Grasshopper libraries folder, which I kind of forget what it is. So I don't know what it is. So I'm going to go to, I could go to Grasshopper files, whatever, but I also can go here on the command line, Grasshopper folders, and then hit on components, and then that will open immediately my Grasshopper libraries. So I can open here a new folder and say Pcam plugin test, for example. I can copy this thing here, and then I can drop it here. And then if I restart my Rhino environment, let me show you. If I restart my Rhino environment, and open Grasshopper, hopefully, oh, okay. So we can see that this is not going to work because, oh, I didn't expect this to happen, because the version of Rhino that I'm using is actually older. So the version of the Rhino Common Library 7.7 is older than the version of the template generator that was downloaded with the extension, which in this case is 7.13. So if I do that, that was an interesting error. And I go to curves, primitives, you can see that I still don't see that component anywhere here. All right, so, okay, so let's go back then. So there's two ways then that you can solve this. One, you can update Rhino so that you have a more modern version of Rhino Common, or you can go into your Visual Studio project with the plugin and you can downgrade the version of the Grasshopper SDK that you're using for this project. This is actually much more advanced than I expected for this video, but since we're here, why not? So I'm going to go to dependencies, I'm going to go to packages, and I'm going to go to Grasshopper. And you can see that the version of Rhino common is 7.13, or the version of the Grasshopper API. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on Update. You can see that I open the package manager. And if I click on the package manager, you can see that the Grasshopper plugin that I'm seeing, actually, I can even upgrade it to a much more modern version, 7.15. However, what I actually want to do is I want to downgrade it to whichever version I had on my Rhino. So what I want to do is I want to downgrade it from 7.13 to 7.7, which is my version of Rhino. So I'm going to update that. I'm going to make all these changes. So Rhino, Common, and Grasshopper are going to go down in version, etc., etc. So that's fine now. You can see that my package is now 7.7, which matches what I had in Rhino. And I'm going to now do this again. So I'm going to execute the project, which loads, which starts Rhino, and which if I now start Grasshopper, I'm going to have the same problem. I still have the same error here, exactly. Why is that? Because this Rhino, this is confusing at the beginning, this Rhino that I just started from Visual Studio is not loading the more modern version of the plugin that I just compiled in the background, but it's still loading this file that I copy pasted into the libraries folder. Okay? I'm going to explain how to fix this in a second. So how would I have to fix this? Well, I would have to delete from the folder the old Grasshopper version that I created. I will need to go back to my project, to the binary debug net48, then take this file, then copy it again, then drop it here in the library so that I update it with the most modern version. And then if I now execute Rhino, you can already see how tired and how tedious this process is. And if I now execute Rhino and I launch Grasshopper, Grasshopper has now been loaded with the correct file, the updated one. And if I go to curves, primitives, ta-da! Can you see this? Woohoo! We found it! So my Pcam Grasshopper plugin, which if I drop here, is this plugin that takes a plane for creating a spiral that has the inner radius, the outer radius, and some number of turns, and then generates this curve, which is a spiral. And then, of course, I can control this, and then more turns, less turns, whatever. It's sample code that David Rotten made available for us as an example of how to write a component for a Grasshopper plugin. Okay? Beautiful. So this is working. We have some template code. We should be ready to start writing our own components, but the problem is that this process that I've shown you, the idea of making changes in the code, running it again, having to copy the file, etc., is extremely, extremely tedious. No one wants to have to be copying these files all over again every time you change some code and you compile again. That's just not feasible. So what are we going to do then? What I would like to do is find a way to make sure that whenever I hit execute, the Rhino that fires up is loading the updated version of the plugin that I compile whenever I hit this play button. All right? So what am I going to do then? I could do two things. First, maybe what I could do is just write this kind of batch script that whenever I hit play here and I compile a new plugin, it just copies that plugin automatically to here to this folder. But that's kind of a little tedious. There's actually a much simpler way of going about this. The way to go about this is that, first of all, I'm going to remove my plugin from the libraries folder. So the plugin is not going to be there as long as I am developing it. All right? So that's one thing. And the other thing that I would like to do is I would like to make sure that Grasshopper and Rhino not only look at that folder, the libraries folder, for plugins, but they also look at special folders that I might be using for development. In this case, this one. What I would like to do is I would like to tell Rhino, hey, look for plugins in your default folders, but also look for plugins in this one folder that I have in my desktop, which is the one that I'm going to be constantly updating with my plugin. The way to do that is you can go here and say Grasshopper Developer Settings, and then this window pops up. In this window, you can see that you can add special library folders for Grasshopper to take a look at before loading anything. So what I can do here is I can add to this list by pressing an add folder. I can add this copy-pasted route of desktop, my project folder, binaries, debug, net48. And then so that whenever Grasshopper opens up, it looks at all the folders that you have here and it loads libraries from those folders as well. What is that going to result in? So let me close everything, all right? And let me make sure, I'm going to delete this so that we know that we're starting from scratch. So for example, let's say that I'm going to change the name of the component. I'm going to call it Hello Pcam, for example, all right? And the description is going to be Hello Pcampers, for example. All right, I'm going to save this and I'm going to hit execute, which will, first of all, it will rebuild the plugin, it will create a new version of the plugin, and then it will open Rhino. As we open Rhino and I open Grasshopper, what you will see is that Grasshopper now has taken a look at this folder and then has picked up this new library that has shown up. So if I go to curves and if I go to primitives, you can see how the component has now changed in name and now it's not called Pcam Grasshopper plugin, whatever, it's called Hello Pcam. So it has these changes that I just implemented, and in the description it says Hello Pcampers. All right, beautiful. So what this will let us do is have a more integrated and more fluid development environment where any changes that I do now to the code, I can save them. I can now restart the project, a new Rhino will open up, a new updated version of the library will load in Grasshopper, and then we can see the changes immediately. All right, so I can now see that the description text has changed to hello, blah, 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 blah. All right. But this integrated development will also have advantages very soon as we start getting into how to create breakpoints and how to stop the execution of Rhino and how to look at the evolution of the program, okay? Which we will do in further videos down the road. So I believe this is everything I wanted to say for this video. So now that we know how to start an empty Grasshopper plugin project, and we know how to link it to Rhino so that we have a fluid development environment, I think we are now ready to actually start writing our first component from scratch and take a look at what all this crazy blah, 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 what this is, register input parameters, outputs, the solve instance, what all this craziness, what this means, all right? So let's get hands-on and let's take a look at how to do that in the next video. And in the meantime, maybe consider liking this video, hitting subscribe, turning on notifications, saying hi in the comments, whatever you please, okay? Thank you and see you on the next video. Bye-bye.